Alright, so I wanted to make this quick little video to kind of prove a point and explain something. So let's go ahead and explain. Basically, you may know that I'm making a very big video on the Kris is Frisk theory, and every time I bring up Kris is Frisk, somebody will go, oh, but what about like these things that Kris and Cara have in common? And I try to explain, I'm like, well, yeah, I think these things are important and they're obviously intentional, but Kris isn't Cara. And they're like, but Kris has to be Cara, it's so obvious. Well, I'm about to prove why Kris isn't Cara. It's actually very simple. So let's talk about counterparts, right? Alright, so when you look at the characters from these games, right, there's clearly a pattern being set. Basically, there are a set of rules that pretty much every character follows. One of the most important rules is that every character that is returning from Undertale in Deltarune is older than their Undertale counterpart, which is pretty obvious. You know, all of the kids are now teenagers, they're in high school, they have jobs, all of the adults pretty much look the same, which makes sense, and old characters like Gerson are dead, and the amalgamates who were, dying of natural causes in Undertale are also dead because they just died of those natural causes. They didn't get turned into amalgamates. There are a few outliers to this rule, such as Rudy, who is still alive, even though he should have been dead years ago, according to Undertale, where he is dead, and the Dreamer family, who, are here for some reason, even though if these games are lined up on a timeline, Asriel should be like really old, his parents should probably be dead, but that's like a whole other thing. We're talking about Kris and Frisk and Cara right now, so but before we do that, let's look at some Undertale and Deltarune counterparts. We have Toriel here, so you'll see, this is Undertale Toriel, this is Deltarune Toriel. They're obviously the same person. They have the same name, same appearance. They are exactly physically the same. They, have the same personality. They're the same person. They're different versions of the same person. I only used like her ruins, her royalty outfit here, and her teacher outfit here. Toriel does wear this outfit in Undertale, but it looks slightly different, I think, the sprite does. But yeah, so pretty simple here. Going from Toriel to Toriel, she's just wearing a different outfit, she's just wearing her work uniform, right? But these are still different versions of the same character. Now we move to Asgore. I again used his royal outfit here. He also wears this outfit in Undertale, in the end credits, same as Toriel. But again, same person, obviously, same name, same personality, same interests, same exact appearance. Not much to say here. Undyne is a little more interesting, talking about her design itself, it has been changed ever so slightly, right? Her mouth is drawn different, to put more emphasis on her sharp teeth. Her eyes are drawn very slightly different, instead of having so much space taken up by her eyes, and then like her red eyeshadow, and then her eyebrows, it's just her eyes and her eyebrows, put more focus on those to help her expressions. Her eye is drawn with a little bit of more light to it in Deltarune. Her ponytail is drawn different. It's more red instead of having this so much harsh shading on it, and she's got like a swoop in her hair, right? But other than that, she's obviously the same person. She's just had a very slight design update. But the most important thing is her lack of a missing eye in Deltarune, right? We don't know how she lost her eye in Undertale. We can assume it may have happened during training, right? Or hey, maybe it's just, I saw a theory years ago that it's not actually, she didn't actually lose an eye, it's just armor. The same way Frisk's armor is all different clothing items. Bit of a silly theory. I'm pretty sure the intention is just that she did lose an eye, but in Deltarune she has not lost that eye, right? So that's all the differences between Undyne explained. She has very slight design changes that make her sprite look a bit better, and she's not missing an eye anymore. We get to Bratty, another returning character. She didn't have an overworld sprite in Undertale, so here's a crunched down version of her shop sprite. The only real difference with her is that her hairstyle is slightly different. In Undertale, it's kind of like she's got like a corkscrew kind of pigtail going on, and in Deltarune, they just look a bit more generic. She has a different outfit on, but you know, again, a different outfit is a different outfit, and your hair is not a permanent part of you. You can change how it looks, and you can have different hairstyles, right? So, again, not much to talk about here. Caddy is a little more interesting than Bratty, though. She has a completely different hairstyle. In Undertale, she had this, like, it was very short, and there was, like, nothing at the back. She had this little dyed swoop here. In Deltarune, though, it's got more of, like, a curl to it down here. And her whole like vibe of her outfit has changed, right? This is probably because she takes on a slightly more different role. You know, she's not like the cool like back alley cat. Instead, you know, she calls herself Kris's aunt as a joke, but that's her vibe. You know, she's like the mom, she's the aunt. She's kind of at the age. I wouldn't be surprised if like she did have like a kid that's like a few years old. You know, like a really young kid. I don't think she actually does because we don't see a kid, but you know, she could. She's that age. She's young mom, young aunt vibes, right? And her design changes to reflect that. But, you know, there's something you notice here, right? All of these characters, even if they do have changes, are still very, very visibly and clearly recognizable as the same person, right? Let's talk about someone who looks a little more drastically different, right? I completely forgot to do number 2. Let's look at some examples. Well, right. Sorry. So yeah, these were the examples. These were the examples we're looking at. So now, let's look at another example. Let's look at Monster Kid. Monster Kid looks pretty substantially different from their Undertale design, right? But there are reasons for that. As we established, Deltarune characters are older than the Undertale characters, right? So they've been made taller to reflect that. And, you know, you could say they look a little more mature. You know, they look a little less dopey. They don't have this, like, constant wide open smile. They look a little more chill. But some other important parts of their design have been changed, though, right? You've got the horns here. In Deltarune, they take on a totally different shape. And it's probably not because the shape of their horns has, like, literally, you know, changed completely. What's going on here is that their horns are supposed to be like in the middle of their head, right? You know, like one would be right here, and then like they'd like go around the back of the head, you know. But they're drawn this way because, well, this looks more appealing in a 2D sprite, right? This is more interesting shape language. In Undertale, though, a lot of people early on mistook these horns here as like a hair bow, right? So in Deltarune, not only are these spikes like bigger because Monster Kid is older, but they've also gotten rid of this confusion. You know, these are clearly spikes on the back of their head, right? Other than that, though, they look pretty much the same, right? They've still got like the kind of like, maybe not bruised eye, but you know, whatever's going on here, they've got the same thing. Their outfit's different. You know, they don't have the striped shirt like kid thing anymore. They've just got an orange shirt or dress or whatever this is supposed to be. But you know, you don't just want it to be an orange thing on the character, right? You make it a little more interesting. You add a pocket and like a necklace, you know, add some more detail. But even with all of these changes, it still follows the rules. You know, they're older and they might have a different outfit, but they're still clearly the same person. It's still following the pattern set by all these other characters, you know? And all of the design changes make sense for the context of Deltarune. Okay, but next, I want to do something. Let's ask some questions. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at some Deltarune exclusive characters, right? Ones that don't have Undertale versions to reference. So, if I ask you, you know, what Rudy and Noelle look like in Undertale, because we do know they exist. Rudy is mentioned in the alarm clock dialogue, and Noelle is mentioned by Sans in the Xbox version, so is Des, by the way. I think their mom is mentioned in something. She's obviously not the mayor, because we know Snowdin doesn't have a mayor, so she probably is just a mom. But anyways, if I were to ask you what Rudy looks like in Undertale, well, the correct answer is that we have no idea because we've never seen him before. But I know that you know he probably looks something like this, right? He's a, you know, tall reindeer monster. He's got black hair, he's got like a goatee, you know, he's a dad, he's a cool reindeer dad, right? Even though we've never seen him, we know that's what he looks like. Even though we don't know for a fact because we've never seen him, we still know that's what he looks like. You know, he's Rudy. And Noelle, well, same thing with her. She's definitely younger in Undertale from what we know. She probably looks a lot like her silhouette from Chapter 2 of Deltarune. But you know, she looks like her dad. She's got lighter brown fur than him. She's blonde. She probably wears pigtails like in that one Deltarune sprite. She's got a red nose. But again, we know this. We know this is probably true, but we don't know it. We're making assumptions here. Rudy and Noelle technically could look completely different in Undertale, and we wouldn't know. But they probably don't, and we know that because of the pattern that's been established. These characters exist in Undertale, so they probably look something like this. Same with Susie. Now, Susie is interesting because she actually has a slightly different name in Undertale, which is an intentional detail. But, you know, if I were to ask you what Susie looks like in Undertale, well, we don't know. The correct answer is, I don't know, because we've never seen her. But, even though we've never seen her, we still know that she's probably a purple dinosaur monster with brown hair, right? You know, again, she's younger because in Undertale, Clam Girl says that Susie is about Frisk's age. So just like Noelle, Susie would be younger. She'd be smaller. She'd probably also be wearing like a, you know, like a cuter like outfit because she's like a little girl. You know, so we don't know what Susie looks like, but at the same time we do know. You know, we're making this assumption because it makes sense, right? There's no reason she shouldn't look like this. Now we get to Papyrus, right? And his name hasn't actually even been mentioned in Deltarune by any characters. It's mentioned in the Steam page and stuff, and I think, if I remember correctly, his font and his like talking sounds are in Deltarune's code, but other than that, no mention of Papyrus. All we've heard about is Sans' brother, who has not been name dropped in Deltarune yet, unless you count the like the Goner Maker, like Gaster commenting on the name, which I don't, because that's not really another character like in the light world talking about him. But regardless, that's not the point. The point is, if I asked you, you know, hey, what does Sans' brother in Deltarune look like? Again, the correct answer would be, I don't know, because we haven't seen him. But I know, and you know, everyone knows that Sans' brother is Papyrus, and he's a tall skeleton. He's got a goofy little face. We don't know what he's wearing in Deltarune because he's probably not wearing the battle body. We already know the origin of this in Undertale. But we're assuming that he looks like this. Why? Because of all of these characters. Because of the pattern, because of the rules that have been set up, right? And for these characters, we're assuming the same thing because of these rules, right? So, let's experiment, right? Let's make our own Deltarune character. Here is Cara from Undertale. Let's put them in Deltarune. Let's follow the same logic that all these other characters follow, that Toriel and Asgore and Undyne and Alphys and Monster Kid. Let's follow their logic, right? I have a like an edited vessel sprite here because I don't feel like drawing this from scratch. That is stupid. So yeah, let's start with the basics, right? Skin color. This is a bit interesting. A lot of people theorize that, oh, you know, Cara isn't actually white, which, I mean, I guess we don't know that they're, you know, white. They could be some other nationality, but, you know, some people theorize this isn't Cara's real skin color. But the important thing is, those are theories. They've never been confirmed, and they probably never will be because I don't think they're true. The theory that the theory that Cara used to look like that unused human sprite is pretty much entirely baseless. That is unused content. We don't know what it's for. We don't know when it was made. We know nothing about that, so I don't think we should even be using it for a theory at all. And some, even separated from that sprite, some people just say, oh, maybe Cara is pale because, you know, they lived underground and had no sunlight. Which, like, sure, again, that's a fun headcanon, but it's not really a theory because there are no implications of that, right? There's nothing ever that, like, implies that. This is just what Cara looks like as far as we know. Or the the theory that Cara, like, is pale because, you know, they're a reanimated corpse, but why would they just look white? Like, if Cara was supposed to be like a reanimated corpse and look all pale, you think they'd be like gray or whoa. You think they'd be like gray or like white or something, but no, they just have a natural skin tone, right? So all of that probably just means that Kara's like white, or they look white, you know, that this is just their skin tone, this is how Cara looks. All of the theories that imply otherwise are pretty much baseless, have never been confirmed. We have so many official pieces of Cara artwork, and none of them look like that. They all look like this. So we're gonna make this Deltarune Cara look like that, okay? Now, for their hair color, this is actually also kind of interesting, because if you look at Kara's sprites, right, you might notice there's some weird little bits here where there is a darker brown, and it's the same darker brown as Frisk's hair. It's the same darker brown as the vessel. See, same exact color. But let's talk about why that is. So, I think Cara actually probably used to look like this. I think Cara used to have the same darker brown, right? Why is because, well, let's see what happens if I take this lighter brown and paint bucket. What happens? Well, their eye and their mouth turn this lighter brown as well, because they were drawn, you know, very close to the hair, and you get these same exact darker pixels left behind, right? The same exact ones. So if you scroll down here, you can see what all of Cara's sprites would have looked like before. And what's interesting about this is that we know Frisk used to have black hair and a black outline, right? But very early into development, it was changed because Toby was like, oh, you know, there are a lot of black backgrounds in this game, and that's going to look kind of bad if you have the character on the black background. So Frisk was given dark brown hair. But that doesn't mean Frisk actually has black hair and it's just the sprite that looks dark brown. No, Frisk has dark brown hair. It's in every piece of official art, it's in every piece of merch, every piece of promotional art, art by the devs, fan art by the devs, everything. Frisk has that colored hair, because that's just their hair color, you know? Their old design had black hair, their new design has dark brown hair. So, if we apply that to Cara, Cara probably used to look like this. They used to have the same hair color as Frisk, but that's not the case anymore, and this is reflected pretty much all the time in official art. Cara usually always has a slightly different hair color than Frisk. So, that means when making this Deltarune Cara, we have to apply this, right? So let's do this. Let's make that dark brown, this light brown, because that's what color Cara's hair is. Right? When it comes to their shirt, honestly, we could do anything. It doesn't really matter what color their shirt is because it's a shirt. I personally really hate when people use the shirt thing as argument for Kris being Cara, because it's a shirt. In Chapter 5, maybe Kris goes swimming or they get soaking wet for some reason, I don't know, and they have to change into a different shirt, and it's gonna look nothing like Cara's because it's a shirt. A shirt does not matter. A shirt doesn't say anything about who these people actually are. It's just a shirt, right? It's just a green shirt with a stripe on it. So we could just use that here. Let's go ahead. Let me just draw this in the same way Kris's is. That looks kind of messy. Here. Okay, yeah, so we could just do this. We could just copy Cara's shirt straight over to this Deltarune Cara, but just to have some fun, because I feel like it, we're actually going to make it look more like Frisk's shirt, kind of like an inverse to Kris, right? I don't have the exact colors on me right now, so I'm just going to get as close as I can. Let's have a nice blue, and then let's get this kind of pinkish purple color for the stripes. I guess it doesn't really matter exactly what color it is. So yeah, let's for fun, let's just say Deltarune Cara would look like this. Let's get a shading color in there for the little arm bit, right? All right, yeah, that looks fine. Who cares? So it's a shirt. It can look like whatever. It can be whatever colors. I could have made it orange and purple. It does not matter because it's a shirt, right? Now, I would say one of the most iconic parts of Cara's design is their pink blush, right? Now, whether this blush just be to make them look more like an Earthbound character, or whether Cara is blushing, which kind of goes against the whole like corpse thing, right? Because why would a corpse be blushing? Or maybe they're wearing like blush makeup. Doesn't really matter what it actually is, but it's a very important part of their design. So we're gonna put it here, right? Because it really is an important part of their design. Like, if someone draws a smiley face and then puts these little blush marks next to it, a lot of people associate that with Cara. It's a very iconic and important piece of imagery, right? So to ignore it would just be kind of weird. Now, I'm not going to draw a face on this because I don't think it would look that good. So let's do something else. Let's, does this color work? Okay, I actually think this blue is a pretty good shading color for this. So let's do the shadow and the hair, just like, just like Kris. They've got these long bangs that hide their eyes. Let's do something like this. I'm going to try to... one thing about Cara's hair, actually, I want to mention real quick. Realistically, or like if you want to be accurate to their design, Cara should technically look something like something like this, right? Because in the cutscenes, their ears are like covered by their hair, and they have these like straight bangs. Maybe you could even do this. The reason why this wasn't done is probably because it looks stupid. So you know, it just looks the way it does. So we're not going to give them the straight bangs here because their Undertale sprite doesn't do it. Let's try to do something. Let's try to do something like. How many pixels is that? Whatever. Let's do something like this. I think that looks alright. And then let's give them the mouth. They could be smiling. Like does that look right? I'll just give them like the Kris kind of like blank mouth because whatever. So yeah, this is a pretty successful thing, right? We followed the rules. We have taken Cara, we've made them taller and older looking because every other character does that. Let's get Monster Kid. All the characters are older. Every character has become older, right? So Cara has to do that as well. We've kept their most iconic traits, right? We've got the colors, we've got the blush. So like this is pretty obviously Cara, right? The shirt doesn't really matter. I mean, Monster Kid's stripes were an important part of their design, right? Very iconic. That's been ditched because it's a piece of clothing, right? It's just they're just wearing clothes, right? It doesn't actually really matter that much. It's not as important as people think it is, really. Like it really truly is not. It's just a shirt. Is Kris's shirt supposed to remind you of Cara's? Yes, but it's also just a shirt, and they probably have a bunch of other shirts. They probably have a shirt that looks like Frisk's, right? They're just not wearing it today, I guess. So yeah, I think this is a pretty successful design, right? We follow the rules. This looks like Cara. They've got the Kris kind of longer bangs and shadow. They've got the neutral expression. So they definitely kind of resemble Kris, but they're still obviously Cara. So this was just an example, right? I have this Cara sprite that I actually made recently that I think looks a little better because this is actually just an edit of Kris's sprite. It's not an edit of the vessel, and it keeps their shirt, right? So maybe you think a Deltarune Cara would just look like this. Either way, either of these are fine. They both get the point across that this is supposed to be Cara. But then we take a look at Kris. There's a problem here. The problem is that Kris, it does not look like Cara. Maybe superficially they do. Yeah, they've got similar hairstyles and kind of like, they have the same basic design, but that's because these are very basic designs, Kris and Frisk and Cara all kind of look the same already. But Kris and Cara don't have the same skin color. They don't have the same hair color. No other character does that, right? No other character. Look, we can get Bratty here. Same exact shade of yellow. And same exact shade of green. Caddy here. I think Caddy might actually... Hold on. Wait, Caddy has a very, very slightly different purple, right? But she's still purple, I think her eye color is different too. Yeah, just slightly. But, I can chalk this up to... the light world and Deltarune just having a warmer color palette overall. So yeah, making very slight tweaks to a character's colors is pretty reasonable, but most characters don't do that, right? And with Caddy, it's barely noticeable. I thought they had the same purple, they don't. Bratty has the same colors. Undyne, boom, boom, and boom, boom, same color. Asgore and Toriel, obviously the same colors. Monster Kid, boom, boom, wait. Yeah, boom, boom, same color. Let's do their horns or spikes, whatever. Same color, exact same color palette, except for their shirt, because it's a shirt, it doesn't matter. These characters, right? We haven't seen them in Undertale, but if we did, Susie would probably still have these exact same colors. Noelle and Rudy would probably have these exact same colors. So why doesn't Cara, right? Or Kris, you know? If this is supposed to be Cara, why don't they just look like Cara? And this is the question nobody can ever answer. Every time I ask someone this, they're like, oh, well, you know, maybe this is what Cara used to look like. But no, those are theories. Those are headcanons. Those are things with little to no actual basis, right? So you can't use those as an excuse, because Cara has never looked like that in official art. Cara always looks like this. Cara has never once been depicted as looking like the way people claim that they probably actually looked, because that's not their design. This is Cara's design, right? Cara does not look like this. Cara does not look like Kris, right? Like, and you may be saying, okay, but like, why? Why is that so important? Because the rest of the characters do. There's a pattern here. There is a rule. There's a set of rules. When Toby and Temmie, you know, design these characters, they're not just doing whatever they want. There's clearly effort put in to making sure these characters have a new little twist put to them, have a new, you know, have some new charm. You know, they have fun with these designs, but they don't make them unrecognizable. They don't make them look like different people, you know? This is still Monster Kid. These are still Toriel and Asgore and Undyne, Bratty, Caddy, Alphys, every other returning character, you know? And if we do ever get to see these characters in Undertale, if we get, you know, when we see Papyrus and Deltarune, if we ever do at this point, they're gonna follow these rules too. So why would Cara get special treatment? Why would Cara be the one to get a different skin tone? You know, they lose one of their most iconic features being the blush. They lose their hair color that has been consistent and, you know, used in official art and stuff for years. Why would Kris change all of that? Why would they be the exception? You know, you have to have an answer to this if you're going to say Kris is Cara, because otherwise they can't be Cara. Kris cannot be Cara unless there is some secret lore thing that we don't know, which I'm 99.9% positive there isn't going to be, because Kris just isn't Cara, right? They can't be. They physically cannot be Cara, which is not the same case for any of these other characters. Cara does not get an exception. They don't get a pass. Kris is not Cara. Now, if you believe that Kris is a brand new character with a bunch of relations to Cara and Frisk, that's fine. I don't personally believe that, because I think, you know, if Kris was really going to be cemented as their own character, they would look different. Like, it would be as easy as giving Kris a different skin tone. Boom, we make Kris look like this. Then boom, I would not really try to argue that this is Frisk, that Kris is Frisk, because, you know, you've changed a core element of what they look like as a person, right? Or let's say they had, let's go a little further. Let's say they had black hair. I would not say this is Frisk, because I've changed how they look. Just like people are saying has been done from Cara to Kris. But that's not what happened. Kris has the same hair color and skin color and everything as Frisk. Why? Because Kris is either a new character that looks just like Frisk and has a bunch of connections to Frisk and Cara, or it's not that complicated and Kris is Frisk. Thank you for watching.